This episode contains sensitive content. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Culture Podcast, where we uncover the hidden mechanics of high control groups, their tactics, and their impact. And we speak with the survivors who broke free. My name is Derek, and I'm your host.
My name is Trinity, and I'm also your host. On this podcast, we explore cult life as real people who have lived through the life-changing process of leaving a high control group.
All right, welcome back to the podcast, everyone. We are excited to have a guest on today. I'll just give you a quick rundown. Trent's going to say some things as well. So quickly, Trent. Hello, Trent.
Hello.
And then, of course, I'm Derek. And I want to talk about our guest. Our guest is an author. She wrote a book called 1,000 Tiny Paper Cuts. She's also the founder of Tears of Eden, which is a nonprofit for survivors of spiritual abuse, and also a former podcast host about trauma and pop culture. And I think on hiatus, the Uncertain podcast, and I'm uncertain if that's certain, a certified trauma recovery coach, and has a master's in religion and culture. We're very excited to have Katherine on. Welcome to the podcast.
I'm excited to be here too.
I want to say right off the bat, we have about an hour, and I wish we had 5 because the book was really amazing for me to read.
Thank you.
I think a lot of our listeners will resonate with it.
Absolutely.
We'll squeeze what we can in, and maybe we can have you back for round 2. I want to make a disclaimer and a recommendation right off the bat. We did not receive any financial compensation for this interview. We were not asked to endorse or advertise the book. But with that said, I think I speak for Derek and we're both recommending this book to all of our listeners. It's a very good book, fantastic perspective, especially for women. And it's a great explanation of high control groups through your lived experience, how religious power is abused, and to me, a great example of how a survivor can help others. So the book's available on Amazon in audiobook, paperback, and Kindle. We have both purchased copies of our own volition, even though we got an advanced copy. And I just want to say the book has earned our endorsement, not through money, but by merit. And we appreciate that.
Thank you so much. That's very, very high praise. Thank you so much.
So, oh yeah, go ahead, Derek.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say another thing we want to get into before we talk about the book and just kind of some of your experiences and all of our guests on here, like it's very conversational.
Great.
So if you have a question for us, a thought for us, by all means, jump in.
Well, yeah, I want to ask the question that I asked before I started recording.
Yeah. So we'll get to that. But
so I have a context.
Yeah. But we just want to talk a little bit about your efforts with Tears of Eden.
Sure. Yeah. So Tears of Eden came before the book, which is about spiritual abuse in the evangelical church. And Tears of Eden came from my research when I left an abusive church, looking for people who were talking about spiritual abuse, religious trauma, and were like a nonprofit that was just like creating resources and helping people. And I couldn't find anything. I found one couple up in Massachusetts that ran like a what's it called? Like a rehab center for people who have left like cults and gangs. And there was like a lot of overlap between the two of those things. And that was like really fascinating. And that was it. There's a lot more out now. And I think all of us around that 2020 timeframe were like, are there any resources? No, there are not. Okay, I guess I'll make some. And then there's like, 5 or 6 of us out there now. So it is a nonprofit primarily focused on providing resources for naming the experience and also connecting people with stories of people who've gone through something similar. And then we also have support groups, just small, really like 10, 12, 15 people support groups for folks to connect with each other who have experienced spiritual abuse. And we used to have a podcast. Podcast is on an indefinite hiatus, mainly because you kind of have to choose where you put your energy.
Oh yeah.
And we had 110 episodes, and so I was like, that's a good number of episodes, and they're kind of evergreen in terms of content. And so people are still listening to them. We're just not creating anything new.
No, that totally makes sense. Just kind of starting out, what was the question that you have for me? We can definitely dive into that.
You come from Jehovah's Witness perspective, and so I wanted to hear from you what overlaps you saw in the book with your experience.
It's interesting, the more and more we chat with people on this podcast, most of them are Jehovah's Witnesses, but we do find Mormons
Mhm,
and we just had a recent conversation with someone that was Baptist
mhm,
and actually kind of lived for a time kind of in a forest camp,
mm,
and was kind of very secluded as a child.
yeah,
And it's like we find that there's a lot of similarities, but then there's just
yes,
these little tweaks where people have
sure.
kind of made Christ their own, or the religion
Mhm,
their own.
yeah,
But yeah, the whole time I was reading your book, I just found, gosh, like, I don't know, people choose to use religion, in my opinion, as the tool for their control.
mhm, and it works.
And
It's
it really
yep,
works. I often find the equation in my mind is I'm never going to win versus God.
mhm,
Because if a person is wielding God
yep,
as like, this is why I'm doing this, I lose.
100%. You can't argue with God.
Yeah, so yeah, it was really interesting, but the other interesting, and I'm curious your take as well, Trent, because of the way we grew up, it had just a different tint.
Okay.
Jehovah's Witnesses, with the kind of just differences of what they believe, and they always said they were Christian,
Mhm, mhm.
but it's like, but we weren't really.
Mhm.
Like,
Like, do you mean defined like the way that evangelicals define it? It didn't pass?
correct. The traditional form of Christianity was never like, we weren't lovers of Christ.
Okay.
We were lovers of Jehovah and his organization, which
Okay.
was the Watchtower and Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Like, we were taught to always follow that organization.
Mhm.
under the guise of following Jehovah and Jesus.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
So every time we talk with people, it's like, oh, it's just, that's, I guess, quote unquote, traditional Christianity is always just a little bit different. So it's fascinating to hear, I guess, more of a traditional take.
It is, but then also it isn't, like, it's weird.
What really struck me about your book and the overlap between what you experience in Jehovah's Witnesses was the patriarchal
Mm.
organization that exists to control.
Yeah.
So when you're a witness, the men take the lead in the
Mhm.
congregation, they take the lead at home, they set the standards, they give the discipline, and in every scenario, women take a back seat to the man.
Mhm.
Where it's drilled into our brain that the God is the father, the head of, they basically say the head of the woman is the
Mhm.
man, the head of the man is the congregation, and the head of the congregation is God. So,
Literally the same thing.
yeah. And that is a huge message in your
Mhm.
book is how the patriarchal organization is really one of
Mhm.
power and control.
Absolutely.
And that is certainly shared between our two experiences.
Yeah, and it's so common in any high control environment or cult environment that there is that patriarchal element. Even in the matriarchal led societies like Christian Scientist, and any of like the smaller ones where there is like a matriarch, they still employ a patriarchal approach and typically have
Yep.
a patriarchy doing their bidding and
Hmm.
enforcing things. So it's just such a common thread throughout a lot of these high control environments.
Yeah, you were constantly just trying to fight the system
Mhm.
at all times. And Trent and I have talked about this before. Like, I never bought into any of that shit. Like, the whole patriarchy in the system. I was supposedly taught to kind of had the headship authority,
Mhm.
and it was just something deep down. Like, I was never, I was married, and it's like, we didn't do
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
I'm very thankful that that was something that, I mean, it must have just been naturally in my DNA, but it was something I never established or kind of, went towards. But Trent actually kind of did. I don't
Mm.
know your take. I don't want to speak for you, Trent.
No, it's fair because my dad was ex-military, ex-law enforcement,
Mhm.
and essentially it was his way or the highway. He deeply inculcated those things into me. However, As I grew in my first marriage, I realized that strict patriarchy didn't serve me
Mhm.
because she was actually from a matriarchal family.
Mhm.
And so I was kind of forced to reckon with
Yeah.
that early on. She's matriarchal and her mother was, the leader of many families,
Mhm.
honestly. And then how we run things in our own house is
Yeah.
different. And, we're equal. But yeah, still
Sure.
deconstructing a lot of that. And especially you had mentioned the systems that people use to control.
Mhm.
And so early on, I realized this is a patriarchal
Mhm.
system. If I want to work within it, I've got to show strength as a man, leadership. And so you're kind of forced as a man in that world
Yes. If you wanna survive,
if
right?
you want to go forward.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's weird. It doesn't serve anyone, right? Like,
right.
if you wanna be a man in that system, you have to be an asshole. If you wanna be a woman in that system, you have to be a doormat, and
Yeah.
neither one of those serves
Exactly.
anybody. And then if you
Yep.
don't want to be an asshole, if you're not inclined that way, if that just doesn't sit well with you, then you're often told that you're weaker or you're not a real man or, you're not a good leader or all of those messages around that as well. Yeah, so neither it doesn't serve anybody other than the people who want to be in charge.
And Trent has extra layers because he wasn't born into being a Jehovah's Witness, but very young, his parents converted from Catholicism.
How common is that to convert from Catholicism or evangelicalism or anything into Jehovah's Witness?
I would say out of all the religions, Catholic is probably a more common one because they share.
That's the most common pipeline to Jehovah's Witness. Okay.
Yeah, like you don't see a Mormon converting to Jehovah's
Okay.
Witness almost ever. It's
Okay.
really rare. But
They
Interesting.
wake up and go like, "Oh, these are both cults."
Okay.
Like we're not doing
Okay.
that.
yeah,
Okay. And so are people who are coming from Catholicism looking for more control or less control? Yeah, what are they typically looking for?
so I think it's an exchange of power because so my family's Hispanic. And so there's cultural layers and
Mhm.
religious layers. But in Catholicism, it's I don't want to speak out of turn, but from my experience anyway, Hispanic culture and Catholicism go hand in hand.
Mhm.
And so a lot of Catholics who are Bible minded start to see that, you know, maybe saying 10 Hail Marys isn't the way that Jesus did things.
Okay.
And so it's easy for them to see Jehovah's Witnesses appear to be using the Bible and appear to have a love for Christ. And
Mhm.
it translates better. They end up in this new system where they can have the patriarchy the way they're used to.
Mhm.
They can read and study from the Bible in a way they haven't in a deeper way.
Mhm.
And so they see it as maybe better.
Yeah.
Yeah, my take is similar to what Trent said, where the witnesses supposedly actually read their Bible and
Mhm.
actually have more of an understanding of what the scriptures are actually saying, which
Yeah.
you do come to learn and find out that is 1,000% false. And they actually have their own translation.
Well, and it's so and that is the same reason why I would say there's a lot of Catholics converting to evangelicalism is it's too legalistic and I want to actually be able to study the Bible for myself. Like
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
same thing.
I think as we get into this, one of my biggest questions was how good are you at construction now? You were building.
Construction
Yeah,
as
that's a
in like
curveball. You were constantly building your father's house.
oh,
You didn't
the
see that curveball
actual
question coming.
construction. Like I was like thinking in terms of like deconstruction and
No,
reconstruction.
no.
Um, yeah, well, it definitely came in handy, like, on mission trips to, like, build things on
Can
our
you?
mission.
I got to keep you on your toes, so I'm sorry for that curveball. You're like, what? Can you describe for our listeners like what I'm actually talking about? Because reading your book and kind of learning what your
Oh, the
father,
construction part?
yeah, learning what your
Yeah.
father kind of made you and your siblings do.
Mhm. Yeah, so he bought a house, when I was, like, 11, and then I mean, I was 11. I am 40 now. So from 11 years old to present day, still building on the house. Like,
Whoa.
they're still building it. He
Yeah,
had this
free
whole
labor.
master plan of all of these additions that he was going to add, remodel, blah, blah, blah. It took a few years longer than expected. And most of it, or a lot of the construction, we did ourselves. And we did as a family pretty much every single Saturday. And then holidays when my dad was off work, Thanksgiving, Christmas holiday, Memorial Day, as always another work day. So I put in thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of free physical labor into that house.
It's I my mindset about reading your book was really your father. I don't know.
Mhm.
But there's so many layers of also in the church systems you were part of. Obviously having a master's in religion and culture and working for the church and different church systems multiple times. I guess my first question for you, knowing your story to some extent, reading your book, but for our listeners, like, what was the first tiny cut? What was the thing that really started and kind of explaining the purpose of the title?
Yeah, well, I feel like the cuts are the things that are happening when we don't know that we are being abused. And they are the subtle um injuries that are occurring for years and decades within the system, and the damage is done by the time you know something happened.
Yeah.
It's so small, it's so slight. Usually one or two things, or five or six or seven or eight things, especially if they're spaced out. We don't see them, we don't notice them, we don't recognize them. It's typically only when we either put them together and we're like, oh, this is really problematic as a pattern, or we reach a point because the trauma is so severe. And I did a book event in Michigan with my friend and colleague Kate West, who wrote a memoir called Rift, and she grew up in the same environment that I did, the stay-at-home daughter movement. And she and I were talking about how both of us, when we left, we were at a point where it was life and death. Not because my father was going to necessarily physically murder me, but
Yeah.
because I was so emotionally distressed, like it felt like death. I felt like I was going to die. And so it can build up so much that it gets to that place, or you can have just something really catastrophic happen within that context that sort of wakes you up within it, or you just start to see the patterns and realize something's not right and I need to get out of this. There's a bunch of different ways that we come to recognize
Yeah.
that we have received these thousand little cuts of thousand little injuries
Yeah.
compounded together.
I feel that this is a pretty common for everyone who leaves a high control group. Like when we talk to survivors of ex Jehovah's Witnesses, we ask them, what was the first time that you realized something was
Mhm.
off? And we've had many tell us that it happened in their early childhood,
Mhm.
like before they were
Mhm.
10. They started to realize the cognitive dissonance that
Yeah.
was there, and it just tends to build over time. But imagine being a child and you're already living a life of death by a
Yeah.
thousand cuts. And that's so sad
Mhm.
to me. I feel sad for all of us.
Yeah, and then at that point, you don't have, I mean, it's like any domestic abuse situation. You don't have the resources or the power to leave or to even speak up for yourself in that
Yeah.
context. And yeah.
So I guess two things come to mind. Maybe a brief overview of your story, so listeners kind of understand maybe some of the frameworks and kind of some of the things, but also you describe. My personal opinion is you come out of traditional Christianity, but you
Mhm.
also describe yourself as coming out of a cult.
Yeah.
So can you kind of break down maybe a couple of those things as well as why you believe that?
Sure. Yeah, and I feel like having the cult experience is very informative for the traditional evangelical experience. And one of the things I attempted to do with my book to show that the difference isn't that stark between the two.
Yeah.
And so I started out in what is called the Christian Patriarchy movement. Many of the women who have left were known as stay-at-home daughters, meaning that we stayed under our father's authority, often in his physical home until we were married to a man. The idea being a woman is never out from under the authority of a man. You transfer from one man to another. How extreme that is varies from very family to family. my father let us have jobs, but did not want us to have a career, and then did not want us to go to college and have higher education. And so I did my first 2 years of college in secret, without my family knowing that I was doing it. And that was like the main marker of that religion. And religion was the main onus for that. Like, this is God's way. This is the Orthodox way. This is the way that true Christians should be living their life. And then I left that, went to on the mission field, and went to seminary, and then had a career for about a decade working in the evangelical church, and eventually realized that all of the same things that I had grown up with were still in the evangelical church. They were just way more subtle. They were a lot nicer. They were a lot cleaner. And there wasn't anybody like overtly telling you you couldn't go to college. But then there were other very implicit and explicit messages about women being subservient to men that still existed within a normal evangelical expression of Christianity. So that's the overview.
Like, through that time of your life, what how do I phrase this question? You were navigating where you were like dipping your toes to what I feel is like, is this the real world?
Yeah.
Like, what was that like?
Inside of the cult.
No, just like because you had this like really rigorous structure within your own family dynamics,
Yeah.
but then you also dipped out into the world, and it
Yeah.
constantly felt like you were kind of like
Getting a taste.
you were getting a
Yeah.
taste, but then
Mhm.
also a portion of your taste also wasn't the real world.
Yes. So true.
You know? So like what was
Right.
that like as you kind of
Yeah, because
navigated?
it was like conservative evangelicalism. It was like outside of the cult was then the bubble of conservative
Yeah.
evangelicalism, which was also not the real world. And
Yeah.
it was also in the South, and in the very white suburban South. So also not the real world
I know.
either. And so yeah, so there's one thing that I was thinking about recently is I was very fortunate to grow up in the same city as both sets of grandparents. Or I had my father's side, grandfather, grandmother, and then my grandmother on my mother's side grew up with them in the same city as me. And my grandmother on my father's side didn't have a college degree, didn't work until her kids had graduated high school, so was a stay-at-home mom, worked in retail, and I could tell even at a very, very young age, she didn't really enjoy her job, didn't really like it, couldn't wait till she retired, and then just, didn't have a lot, in life, from my perspective. And then I had my grandmother on my mother's side who went to college, got a master's degree in the 50s and 60s, which was very uncommon, and then had a very robust career in the education field as a school counselor, and was a single woman, owned her own home, just seemed a lot happier, and just had just like a very so much more meaningful life, and just seemed so much stronger to me. And so if you had asked me at like 10 or 11, like, which one of these lives would you choose? I knew the life I was supposed to choose, which was the stay-at-home wife, and submitting to a husband and somebody who is married. I knew that that's what I was supposed to choose. But if I was actually given a choice, I'm like, my grandmother's single grandmother, robust career grandmother, owns her own home grandmother. Like, that seems way more appealing to me. And it's just really interesting how you can have these messages like be poured into you, but like one little thing can like be the thing that makes you be like, just like, I don't, this is incongruent.
I think that's ultimately why many people that hold the levers of control don't want you to taste those
They
things.
don't want you to see it. That information control is a huge part of control.
Because the moment you get a little bit, you're like, wait, like life could be different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
okay. And I don't know, I just find it fascinating when I see there's two things that come to my mind. There's when someone innately kind of has a deep down feeling within them, which it
Yeah.
seems like you've had your whole life, that I'm not bound for this life.
Yes.
Like you have a drive and you have something like this prescribed life to me is not within me.
Mm-hmm.
Even maybe if you don't even realize it when you're young,
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then there's the other half that kind of, I don't know, brings me some sadness, where like there's some, maybe women in this case, or people in general, are never given the opportunity to see what life could be.
Absolutely. 100%. Whatever the reasons, whatever the circumstances, yeah, never get to see it, never get to experience it. And we were raised in this pretty, cloistered, controlled environment, but there were a lot of women whose lives were even more controlled and didn't have birth certificates, didn't have social security cards, didn't have
Oh man,
driver's licenses. They were very, very, very isolated.
how archaic.
Yeah, and they didn't have any resources to leave. Like there's very, very few resources to leave. I at least had the internet, right?
Yeah,
And had some access to some things. Like I had my own bank account. My parents had access to it until I was in my late 20s when I took
it's
them off.
wild.
But just stuff like that, where it was like, it could have been so much worse. And then also it was really bad at the same time. And there was an event that I was at, a book event that I was at recently, and someone asked about like the people that are still in it, and like your siblings or your cousins or your parents or whoever who are still in it, like how do you reach them? How do you get to them? And I relate with that so much because there are so many people that I know still in it.
Oh yeah,
And you
us
feel
too.
very powerless, and you want them to be free, and you want them to escape. And I don't think just like constantly telling them, "Hey, this is a cult, you should leave,"
It
is
doesn't. It doesn't.
actually,
It doesn't
it's
work.
not going to work, right? It wouldn't have worked for me. Like if someone was telling me, "Hey, you're living in a cult," there were some little things that people said that like indicated to me that they didn't think that my father was being very kind or whatever. But I don't think I would have responded well if somebody had come at me and said, while I was in it, your dad is abusive or you're in a cult, you should leave. I wouldn't have responded. But just like the situation with my two grandmothers and getting to see these like opposing lifestyles, and seeing my grandmother, just one grandmother just like totally kicking ass at life. And she still is, she's 94. She's still like kicking ass at life. And I answered at that book event when the person asked, like, what do you do about the people still in? And I really think the best thing you can do for them is live a thriving life. Just live a
Yeah,
thriving life. And at some point, they're going to find you on Instagram, or they're going to find your website, or find your email, or find you on LinkedIn or something. They're going to see what you're doing, and they're going to know all of the things that people said about you, and why you're a terrible person and you rejected the faith, or you did whatever the things that people say about you when you leave. And they're going to see a stark contrast to what people are saying about you. And that will be more powerful than a direct, hey, get out, you're in a cult.
1,000%. I think the tough thing is, I think our normal humanity is like, let me reach you,
Hmm.
let me
Well,
try to.
that's what we're conditioned to do, right? Evangelize.
Yeah, yeah, but
Yeah.
but it doesn't work.
It doesn't. Mm-mm.
What I think is interesting is the death by a thousand cuts works both
Hmm.
ways. That's kind of what happened in your
Yeah.
experience. You had a therapist
Hmm.
who impressed upon you that maybe some of the things that were happening were abuse. You eventually started to realize that maybe your mother had been abused,
Hmm.
and it just seems like over time it worked both ways.
Yeah.
That
1,000 tiny
a
wakings.
thousand tiny wakings,
Hmm.
yeah, a thousand tiny points of
Hmm.
healing, maybe.
I don't know. You mentioned like your father like wasn't kind, had some abuse. Are you able to kind of pinpoint some of these things for our listeners of what that actually looked like?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, just from the spiritual perspective, just that, even that idea of like, I'm in charge, and I have the final say. And how at like junior in high school, this idea that I'm not allowed to go to college, I need to stay in my father's home until I get married, was introduced to me, and I started crying. And my father immediately shut me down for having a very genuine emotional reaction to the fact that college is being taken away from me. And
Mm.
symbolically, my freedom is being taken away from me, and I don't have choices. You will marry, and you will homeschool your children, and that will be your life from here on until the end of time. Like there was, to have that impressed upon me and forced upon me when I'm a junior in high school, and not being given. And we had, this isn't in the book, but we had hundreds of conversations in which I'm like, I want to go to college.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what I want to do, and I'm not being given the tools to even know what I want to do. But I know I don't want to just stay here and build your house and cook meals for your family and do your budget for you. Like I want to live my life. I wasn't saying those words, but like that's what I was trying to express, and it was shut down over and over and over and over again. And there was no room for, what do you care about, Catherine? What are you interested in, Catherine? What's
Yeah.
important to you, Catherine? Catherine, you don't seem happy. I want you to be happy. No, we don't care if you're happy.
You didn't have the agency, you didn't have the autonomy. You didn't even necessarily, especially when you were younger, know there were other options.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of comes down to, because you're only given one rigid system,
Yeah.
it's like, what are my choices?
Yeah, and you can't make an informed choice if you don't have all the information. Like that is a really important part of the choice. And like my parents, if you talk to them right now, if you got them on the phone and you would say, "Did you tell Catherine she wasn't allowed to call college?" They would say no. They would say no. They would say that that was not true, because if the Lord had spoken to me and told me I was supposed to go to college, and then I had told them, "Hey, God spoke to me and he gave me this sign, and I believe this is what I'm supposed to do," and I could prove to them that it was going to help me be a wife and help me be a mom, because that was already chosen for me, right? Like that's what I was going to be doing.
Yeah.
Then they would have said yes. But I never did that. So it wasn't that they told me I couldn't do it. It was that God, made this choice for me. And so having this, just this context or this approach that is, this is the only right way. If we were going to present you with other options, then we would have been endorsing those other options, right?
Yeah.
It's like sex, right? If we say the only right way is abstinence until you're married in a hetero marriage, like that is the only way. We're not giving you any other options or any other opportunities to have a fulfilling sex life outside of this one path, because only this one path exists, which means we don't give you any information about birth control. We don't even give you any information about consent. We don't give you any information about bodily autonomy. We don't give you any information about your body in general, in a sexual way, in a care way, an emotional way. And so you've denied somebody all of that information, so they can't make a different choice. And if they do, it is going to be dangerous because they don't have all the information.
When you had these conversations with your parents, I don't know, like, how did you feel afterwards? Like, what was the like when you got back up to your room or wherever your bedroom was, like what were you thinking? Like, I feel like I want more, and it's just constantly rejection.
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember every instance of it. I know that I remember like sobbing afterwards. I remember I'm about to graduate from high school. I have no idea what I'm doing. You're a senior in high school. What is the main thing everybody asks seniors in high school? Where are you going to college? I'm not going to college. I'm not happy that I'm not going to college, but I have to say I'm staying home to prepare to be a wife and mother, because that is what
Ugh.
my father has told me to say. And it just grated on me.
It's crazy that you say that, because the JW context is we were not allowed to go to college.
Nobody.
Strictly forbidden.
You could be shunned,
Okay.
disfellowshipped.
What for?
No higher education.
For anybody.
If you went to college, you would be most likely shunned, which is they do it in the form of disfellowshipping. So your friends and family cannot speak to you. You can't speak to anybody. You lose all your privileges in the congregation.
This is
You have to earn
everyone.
them back.
Mhm.
And this is
Everyone.
across the
So
board. And then what's the reasoning for it?
The reason is if you are dedicated to Jehovah, which is God, and Jesus, his son, and the goal is to save people, why would you spend extra time on additional pursuits? The goal should be the ministry.
shows a lack of spirituality if you want to spend.
So then how do people, just out of curiosity, support themselves, support their families, jobs?
Jehovah's Witnesses are one of the poorest religions out there
Interesting. And you're
per
supposed to be.
capita.
and
So
you're supposed to be. Yeah.
yeah, and if you look at Mormonism, they're one of the richest, and Scientology,
Mm-hmm.
two of the richest religions because of their focus on family. And it's funny, they go the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're spiritual, you want to make a good living and care for your
Yeah.
family. In Jehovah's Witnesses, it's volunteer based. You know,
Mm.
you're volunteering your time and you have 5 meetings a week.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, they track your hours of door to door ministry and you do it all for free.
Goodness.
And it's a sin to make good money.
Slave
Yeah,
labor.
literally.
Yeah, it's yeah. None
Yeah.
of the elders, none of the people are paid. It's all volunteer, um,
Mm-hmm.
and
And then it's
and
because, yeah, kind of forced poverty. Yeah.
yeah, most
Yeah.
witnesses are, they're either kind of part time because they're full time ministers, or they're window washers, they're construction, but nothing is of a higher level.
Yeah, because you have to survive. Yeah. Yeah, just it's interesting because it's like, so that's also a form of control, right? Like, is denying people resources. So, like, this your community, it sounds like, is your resource.
Mhm.
And so then if you were to seek a resource outside of the community, such as an education or a high-paying job, then you're gonna lose your community resource. And so that is a massive control tactic
Absolutely.
that works.
Yeah.
And what we talked about with your parents, what we just talked about, really good examples of DARVO and BITE,
Mhm.
which both of which you talk
Yeah.
about in your book. But these are major sources of control and power.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the BITE model being behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control, which was coined by Steve Hassan, and
Yeah.
then DARVO, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender, which is what happens when you ask or you confront somebody for maybe mistreating you, and they deny what you said, they attack you, and then they make you out to be the offender and them out to be the victim. Doctor, shoot, I hate myself for not remembering the
It's
woman's name.
okay. It's another reason why it goes back to another reason why you
Google
can't
it.
wake someone up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They immediately create the us versus them mentality,
Hmm.
and just immediately kind of go back to their indoctrination. And
Hmm.
it's the more and more you get along and you kind of separate from this stuff, you just start to see these are tried and true mechanics that many people use.
Every high control environment uses,
Yeah.
and the environment could be your family. It could be domestic partnership. It can be an intimate partner. It can be any kind of high control abusive environment uses the same tactics, and because it works.
How far along in you journey from escaping from all this?
From the Christian patriarchy movement, I left my parents' physical home when I was 26. And so that's 14 years now. And then I left the evangelicalism slash the abusive church in 2019. So we're coming up on six years.
Is there anything still lingering that you constantly, like, just, I don't know, it just kind of comes back up?
Yeah, I think some of the residual stuff came was very like
Hmm.
gender based, and having just like all of these messages, not just you can't do it, but also if you do it, it's wrong. And so, like, having to, being someone who I am ambitious and I am someone who really cares about my career, and cares about my financial independence and wants to be able to support myself and take care of myself and not interested in getting married and all of these things that are so just kind of natural inclination but so foreign to this world that I was in and constantly aware of how much I don't fit into that world, and that becomes I become more and more aware of that every year, I think, and I feel like there's new layers of people that end up just kind of fading out of my life because they still hold to those things.
Hmm.
And
Conditional.
yeah, and while I feel like one of the gifts outside of high control religion is the gift of being able to just let people live their lives. I'm
Yeah.
not responsible for people. I don't have to hold anybody accountable other than, just be a decent human being and don't violate somebody else's human rights. Do whatever you want. I don't care. I have come to realize that folks who are still in that environment are not giving that same thing to me. Like they still have an expectation for my behavior, and a hope that I will come back, and
Yeah, yeah.
uh, and and that eventually you eventually come up against that, and so there are new layers of people that reveal themselves. Every couple years,
Oh,
there's a
yeah.
new layer of people. So those things are still present and active.
Does it help you to stay in this space, or is there a longing to eventually depart?
What space?
The space of continuing to talk about your experiences, to mentally kind of always be here, maybe in an effort to help others.
You
Do
mean
you
like what I'm doing right now?
correct? Like
Yeah.
some people talk about like the wounded healer,
Hmm.
that you're someone that was wounded through this experience, but you've actively chose to help others because of it. And then there's others that
Hmm.
are like, I need to leave this space.
Sure. Absolutely.
So where do you find yourself with that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I definitely feel like there's many days where it's like, do I want to keep doing this?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, because I mean, I work with trauma, like it's trauma and abuse, and like what part of it is like the religion part, and what part of it is like the trauma and the abuse is just a lot. And so, but yeah, so there's always like a potential point at which, okay, I think I'm going to move on from this and I'm going to do something else. I've been very intentional, and I was very intentional about this when I was in ministry, because ministry, as you both I'm sure are aware of, can just consume your life.
Mhm.
And I was very intentional about, in every place that I lived, having hobbies and community that were outside of the religious environment. I don't know why I made that choice. I don't know if I was just like, that was just like my personality. I do remember one person saying, in order to avoid having a God complex, you need to have like a hobby that is just like all consuming, something that like when you're doing it, it just like completely pulls you out of that thing. And for me, writing was that. And so I was like always writing and always building community outside of the religious order, because I just need to break from it.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing the same thing now of just having community and hobbies and interests that are not abuse and trauma all the time.
And you have some great hobbies and interests.
Yes, I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. It's great. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. And then there are people that I do talk about it with a lot. And obviously, I have clients, and I have a nonprofit, and I wrote a book about it. So it was obviously something that is a part of my life a lot. But also, I get very intentional times to pull myself out of it and do things where I don't have to be in it all the time. And so I imagine that will increase my longevity, or at least it has increased my longevity and my ability to interact with the subject matter. And then I'm always open to it being over. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely open to it coming to an end at some point. Who knows?
Yeah.
The way you talk, it sounds, and in your book, you've clearly done some therapy,
Yes.
and it seems to have helped.
I love therapy.
Yeah.
I do too. I'm a
Yes.
proponent of it. What advice do you have regarding therapy and counseling for survivors of religious trauma?
One therapy session is not enough.
Mhm.
1 month of therapy is not enough. 6 months of therapy is not enough. 6 years of therapy is probably not enough. And then at the same time, it's very possible that you could still progress in your healing without therapy. Like, I think that that's possible too. Like, therapy is not the only way. I think that finding someone who understands religious trauma and spiritual abuse is really helpful. And I would say the next best thing, if maybe they don't understand that and that's not their specialization, is somebody that specializes in domestic violence, because there's a very clear, a very close connection between a domestic violence situation and high control religion, especially if they maybe also have like a sexual abuse background or something like that. So those things can be really helpful. I think that it's really helpful to get outside of your religious context for your therapy. Potentially, don't see someone who is a Christian.
Yeah.
Just try and, because I mean, I think I had many Christian therapists who are wonderful and lovely and beautiful, and many of my friends and colleagues identify as Christians and do amazing work as therapists. So I don't think it's just like a across the board thing. Don't see someone who is a believer, but I think that it's common for folks who identify as Christian to also see their job as ministry,
Mm,
and trying to
sure.
subtly agenda convert you, even if they're not aware of it. So I think it could be helpful to just get outside the religious context for.
Jehovah's
Um,
Witnesses were always counting time in the ministry. We had a very rigid system. It was like a
mhm,
business where you had to record monthly your time.
mm.
So there was always an incentive as like, oh, I could find someone I can record my time because we had to record time.
So if you are not allowed to go to college, then did you have therapists in the Jehovah's Witness context, or is that evil?
Very frowned upon. It
It's
is
evil. Okay.
very frowned upon to see it.
So there are no Jehovah's Witnesses
No,
therapists. They
No.
don't exist.
your counseling comes from the elders,
Yeah.
Okay.
and they're it's very rigid. There's usually two or three of them that'll come to your
Mhm,
house, sit on your couch, tell you everything you're doing
mhm,
wrong.
And they are not qualified. Again, they're construction workers and window washers,
Not at
and
all.
they have
mhm.
They're volunteers.
no training in this whatsoever.
Yeah.
They have a secret elders book, where they're kind of given all the, if this person says this, do this.
Ah.
It's and none of us know about it while we're in. We
Mhm,
only find out about it when we leave.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, it's I don't know. I feel like the more I'm out, and you know, I guess for lack of a comparison, but to compare, it's like, gosh, we were under a very very high control system.
Yeah.
With where some had the layers of your family control,
Mhm.
and some didn't. Some were
Yeah,
like very casual witnesses.
absolutely. Where are your families in relation to where you 2 are?
Well, for me, my dad shuns me. My mother unfortunately passed away, but I have no contact with any of my family.
Mhm.
I'm the last of 8. I do have some brothers and sisters that are out, but it's they left the religion a while ago, so it's very fractured because I was constantly
Sure.
shunning them
Yeah,
when I was still in.
yeah,
So it's reparative.
absolutely.
But my father was definitely very into control.
Mhm,
My sisters had a very horrible experience growing up,
mhm.
and he loved his sons.
Yeah.
He almost basically, like, once his daughters left, he was like, I want nothing to do with these. They don't exist to me.
Mhm,
And his sons, we stayed in longer, so we were good in his eyes. But eventually, my
mhm.
brother left, I left, and now we're dead to him. So it's very
Mm.
challenging, and
Absolutely.
Trent has kind of his own stuff, but
Yeah, so in my case, my sister and my mother are still in. My dad left when I was about 13. And so part of my trauma is the divide between growing up in a mixed household, the tugging,
Yeah.
one way or the other, having to choose between my dad and God.
Mhm.
And thankfully, my mom and sister don't shun me. We're not no
Yeah.
contact, but there's also, I don't have a mom and a
Right.
sister the way that most
Yeah.
people do. It's very surface
Mhm.
level. We don't talk about religion. I have a question for you. So, you help a lot of people, you've helped yourself, you've come out of an abusive system, and I guess rather than prod you about your current beliefs, what advice would you give someone, a survivor of one of these high control religions or groups, about rebuilding their spirituality or exploring what it looks like after they can consent?
Sure.
When they have the freedom, what
Yeah.
advice would you have for them?
Absolutely. One of the exercises that I work through with a lot of my clients is when in these high control systems, we are taught a beliefs based approach to life. This is what you believe, and your belief dictates how you interact with the world, your worldview, how you show up in the world, and everything that you do has to filter through these beliefs. Are they right? Are they wrong? Are they good? They're bad? That sort of thing. And so when we come out of these systems, we're looking for something else. And a lot of times people go back into other high control environments immediately because they need an anchor of some kind. And like, oh, this high control environment isn't as bad as that one, which is exactly what I did. Like, not as bad as Christian patriarchy movement. Here's evangelicalism. Oh, it's so much better. No, it's not. Same belief system approach to life. And so what I work with a lot of my clients on is shifting from this beliefs-based approach to life to developing a values-based approach to life, and doing which takes some time and often requires that we address some of the trauma around the idea of just desires and like wanting things, and that we're allowed to want things, and we're allowed to have opinions, and we're allowed to care what happens to us, and developing a values-based life that is rooted in what is most important to us. What do we care about? What do we value? And with this values-based approach to life, then you can then filter things through that. And rather than it being good or bad or right or wrong, it's now a value of, do I want to give my energy to that? Is that something I want to spend time on? Is that something I want my emotional energy to go to? And I find it to be way more freeing because I can have individual, independent values, and then I can interact with someone, a friend, over one or two of those values that we have in common. And then all the rest of them, we don't have anything in common, but we don't have to.
Yeah.
But when it's a beliefs-based approach to life, you have to agree on everything. But when it's a values-based approach to life, you have a couple mutual interests, and this is my theater friend, and this is my improv friend, and this is my writing friend, and this is my go to the pool friend, and this is my go on walks friend. And I don't have to be around you based on we believe the same things. It can really just be based on mutual interests, which is another way of forming community outside of these high control religious groups. And so I find it to be really freeing and really helpful, and just help us, make choices about what we want. And then if we want a spiritual practice, if we want a faith, if we want some kind of spiritual community, and that is important to us, then we can decide how much energy that gets and how much we pursue that, and if that is important to us. And it can be for some people and it's not for other people, and it can kind of morph to whatever we want it to be. And values can change. Beliefs can't change. They are right and they must be at all times. Values, they can shift just based on where you are and what you're doing. And it just seems to be a much more freer way to approach things, even spirituality.
So on the same note, this will be my last question, just out of consideration for your time. I really wish we had longer.
Sure.
That's okay.
We'll do it again.
But yeah. So you dedicated your book to every woman who didn't fit into the church, whose ambition terrified the power hoarders, and who built their own table. And I really loved your dedication.
Thank you.
So 2-part question. When did you realize that you wanted to build your own table? And what advice would you have for women or anybody who decides they want to build their own table?
Oh, I love this question. Great final question. Yeah, I think the first time that I was like, I want to build my own table was when I'm in a church that doesn't let women preach sermons. It doesn't let women, serve communion. Actually, they might have been serving communion. I don't remember. But just like, obviously men are running Sunday service, right? And I went into ministry because I wanted to do ministry. And I was somebody who was good at teaching, good at storytelling. And if I'd been a man, I would have been one of those egomania pastors probably because I had the charisma for it. And I would just sit there and I would just like, there are more women here than men. What if one Sunday we just swarmed the pulpit and I was like, Pastor Steve, you sit down. I'm going to preach today. Angelica is going to do the music. Barbara's going to serve communion. We got this.
I love it.
Sit the fuck down. I was like, there's more of us than them. Why do we let them run things? I was just like, It doesn't make any sense. There
Seems to
is
be a
no
bigger army.
Yeah, I was just like, there is nothing here that makes them more qualified to do this than us. So I would think those were kind of like the first, like, why the fuck do we let them run these things? Like, it
Yeah.
just doesn't make any sense. Yeah, and so I would say for women, you decide how long you want to stay in spaces that don't let you be your full self. You can decide, that's a choice that you get to make. But don't spend too much time trying to save that system or change that system. Just get out. Like, yes, you get to make that choice and decide how much, but systems that are already rooted in that, they're not going to change. And if you want to, have a very long suffering battle, fighting that fight, obviously we have to do that to some extent because of just survival and in our country and in our nation, and there is some fighting that is required. But if it's possible to separate yourself and go build your own thing, do that, or find some place that will allow you to thrive. And maybe no place will actually give you the permission to thrive, and it needs to just be you. And you need to start your own business and do your own thing. And don't wait for patriarchal systems to let you be your authentic self.
Well said.
I love that. I think the more and more Trent and I talk with people, you just really just learn more about, I don't know, the struggles and control and systems that people have grown up with. And I love seeing when any person breaks free.
Yeah.
I love it. I love seeing when anyone just finds their true authentic self. And anyone that's like, maybe I haven't landed yet, but I'm navigating and I'm doing it, and I'm nervous, I'm scared, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great to see someone and talk with someone like yourself that has done it, has gone through it, and has put themselves in a position to try to help others as well. So we're really appreciative of you to just give us some of your
Thank
time.
you.
We're very appreciative of you for, to take time to write the book, to have Tears of Eden. We need more people like yourself that have just fought against some of these systems that need to be
Mm-hmm.
abolished.
Absolutely. And they need to go
Yeah.
up in flames.
So thank you so much for your time. I guess as a closeout, we'll just let you kind of talk about whatever Instagrams, websites, anything you want to put out
Sure.
there, just so people know where to find you.
Yeah, I do have a social media presence on Instagram, personal social media presence, which is Katherine Spearing, at Katherine Spearing, and then Tears of Eden, the nonprofit for survivors of spiritual abuse, is at Tears of Eden Official. For both my personal work and also for Tears of Eden, we're putting a lot more attention into our newsletters now, just because there's more control over that. And so I would recommend subscribing to my new newsletter at Katherine Spearing. And then Tears of Eden also has a newsletter, which is tearsofeden.org, and you'll get resources on spiritual abuse right to your inbox.
Great. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Thanks for just spending some time with Trent and I today, and Catherine. And we'll talk with you soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this journey in this era. If you found today's episode valuable, please share it with someone who might need it. Check the podcast description for our socials and other information.
Please consider supporting us at Patreon at patreon.com/culturepod. If you'd like to tell your story, please contact us at cult.ture.pod@gmail.com. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and stay free.